for Camels from Hollywood. Camel Cigarettes present Ed Wynn.
With cigarettes, it's always been the sell that mattered most.
It's important that you get all the pleasure possible from your cigarette. So, have a Camel.
For a future bright and sunny, try a smoke with apple honey. Why be irritated, light and OG? Wow!
Cigarette smoking is not a natural act. You've got to learn to smoke.
Take a puff. It's springtime. It's springtime. It's springtime.
Felt like my lungs was on fire.
Fine tobacco.
And I got nauseous.
Fine, light, naturally mild tobacco.
That's your body rejecting it right there.
That gives you smoothness and mildness and never a rough puff.
For pleasure plus protection.
The tobacco industry's biggest challenge has always been convincing people it's good to smoke.
So good, good, good.
According to a recent nationwide survey, more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette.
They said this was good and that it's okay if you do it, and it was a lie. It's no good, it's poison, and you'll die eventually if you keep doing it.
Janice Dupree is 36 years old. She suffers from kidney and heart disease. She first lit up at age 13, and even though her doctors say cigarettes are making her condition worse, she still smokes.
It's not a question of whether it's right or wrong or whether it's killing you or not. You just do it.
Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Hospital, New York. It's full of people like Janice who bought the tobacco industry's line. For many, it's their last stop as a smoker. Yet even here, the addiction is greater than the disease. Every day, cancer patients make their way outside for a nicotine fix.
When I didn't have a cigarette at times, I took it. But my God, it's like worse than a drug addict.
Now that we know that smoking-related disease killed more than 400,000 Americans last year, the tobacco industry is under fire as never before, and it's fighting for its life, too. For the cigarette companies to survive, they must replace those smokers who quit or die. So the recruitment never stops.
And who are the most likely targets? It's kids. 90% of all smokers begin smoking before the age of 18. Half of all new smokers begin smoking before they're 13. The new smoker is a kid, sometimes not even a teenager. And those kids are the targets of the most sophisticated and the most manipulative advertising campaign we've seen by a corporation, the tobacco industry.
Richard Schrader, a consumer activist, has studied the marketing techniques of the tobacco industry.
Kids smoke because of peer pressure. They smoke because they want to be cool. Cigarettes will make you successful. Cigarettes will make you popular. They used all the symbols and all the codes that really matter and push the buttons of the constituency they're trying to get. In this case, it's teenage kids.
Schrader led a successful fight in New York City to pass the toughest law in the nation, designed to keep kids out of Marlboro country. And with good reason. 2,000 New Yorkers die every year from violent crimes, but smoking kills 14,000. You could mistake this couple for father and daughter, but they are actually an undercover law enforcement team. Their job is to crack down on the city's #1 killer. And they're about to make a bust.
Hi, can I have a pack of Newports?
The law prohibits the sale of tobacco to anyone under age 18. Wendy is only 13.
City Inspector, I'm with Consumer Affairs.
If you sell cigarettes to a minor in New York City, it can cost you.
Take care of this as soon as you can. All the information is on the back. On how to
The inspectors can fine violators as much as $1,000. But the stings haven't solved the problem. Kids are still sold cigarettes 90% of the time.
What else you want? That's it.
The new law also forced cigarette ads from city property, like phone booths. This one was removed. But that didn't stop Joe Camel. His face adorns private property all over the city. Joe Camel is bigger than any law.
They used this camel on a surfboard. They used the camel shooting pool. They used the camel listening to rock music. Before Joe Camel, only 1% of consumers under the age of 18 bought Camel cigarettes. A year after saturation of Joe Camel commercials, 33% of those consumers under 18 years old bought Camel cigarettes. It's been profoundly successful.
But when R.J. Reynolds Tobacco was first accused of targeting children with Joe Camel, spokesman Tom Griscom denied it.
Our market is not kids. Our market is trying to reach 35 million smokers who smoke another brand.
The emergence of Old Joe as a cult figure has been a bonanza for R.J. Reynolds Tobacco. Industry observers say that success is forcing the nation's largest cigarette company, Philip Morris, to defend the #1 brand among teenagers, Marlboro. The Marlboro Adventure Team is Philip Morris's answer to Joe Camel, a fleet of Marlboro vans from coast to coast, driven by young, enthusiastic workers.
Thank you, sir. Thank you much. All right. Have a good day. You too.
The vans are chock full of free gifts, from baseball caps to camping gear. Free, that is, if you buy enough Marlboros. It is one of the most expensive promotions in the history of the industry. By some estimates, more than $300 million. And the campaign has provoked the wrath of anti-smoking groups. Turning Point wanted to learn more about the Adventure Team controversy. So we followed this van to a working-class neighborhood in South Boston, where it was scheduled to spend the day outside this smoke shop. But when the driver learned Turning Point was there, he packed up his van.
I'm not allowed to comment, and I'm also leaving.
Why are you leaving?
Because I'm not allowed to talk to you.
Why?
Because that's what I'm instructed.
Oh. Who gave you those instructions?
Philip Morris. If you have any questions, call them.
And so we did. I dialed the number on the card to get more information about the Adventure Team.
Thank you for calling Consumer Affairs. All lines are busy.
It took 3 hours before I reached a public relations spokesperson willing to take my questions.
No, not at all, thanks.
She wouldn't tell me how much was spent on the campaign or what their long-range plans are.
I don't know. I don't know.
But she did answer this question.
You do not want kids to smoke.
No, we sure don't.
Do you think kids would be attracted to the kinds of products that your van program promotes? Like backpacks and the shirts and the jackets and the caps?
I think that individuals who are interested in outdoor adventure and who smoke might be interested in participating in our promotion. I can't tell you what interests kids. I have no interest in that.
To find out more about the Marlboro Team, we went to this diner with a hidden camera for a job interview to drive one of the vans. John Rossano runs a dozen Marlboro vans in the Brooklyn area.
When you're dealing with like pretty good local neighborhoods, family-type neighborhoods, and you're trying to con the young smokers to switch to Marlboro, you know what I mean?
They go to the baseball parks with their Marlboro billboards. They go to the monster truck rallies. They go to the auto racing. They take their Marlboro vans to low-income communities, and they park them in front of the convenience stores, and they peddle death and disease on the most vulnerable in our society, and they don't care. And if the tobacco industry doesn't get teens, they'll be out of business, and they know it.
Greg Connolly is trying to put them out of business with commercials like this one.
Last November, the voters of Massachusetts took a stand.
Connolly runs the Massachusetts Tobacco Control Program. Despite intense industry opposition, voters approved a proposal to spend $50 million to create this anti-smoking campaign.
It's time to draw the line. It's time for a show of strength. It's time we made smoking history.
Marlboro's fighting back because they don't want to give the youngsters Camels rather than Marlboro. They're trying to link smoking Marlboro with, adventure, with whitewater rafting. To get the kayak raft, you got to smoke 7,200 Marlboro cigarettes. Now, if you can inflate that raft, blow it up after smoking 7,200 Marlboro cigarettes, you're a real superhero.
Criticism of Marlboro's adventure team has begun to spread beyond the anti-smoking community.
Tobacco is so addictive that if it was discovered today, this country wouldn't allow it to be a legal product.
Newspapers have always depended on cigarette ads. But that's not true anymore at the Seattle Times. The adventure team's emphasis on outdoor sports gear offended publisher Frank Bleffin.
We believe the tobacco companies' targeting of the groups, and particularly kids and women and minorities, has become more obvious.
So the Seattle Times became the latest big city daily newspaper to ban tobacco ads. And publisher Bleffin claims to have no regrets about losing $100,000 this year alone.
All you have to do is read your daily newspaper to read the scientific articles about what smoking does to your lungs.
But the tobacco companies deny the cause and effect.
And if anybody believes that, it's only the tobacco companies.
And the hypocrisy is that the people that are doing this, the CEOs of these companies, they wouldn't touch the stuff.
None of them smoke?
Not one.
We wanted to ask the chief executives of the major tobacco companies why they don't use their own product. All declined to be interviewed. John Rosano, who directs the Marlboro vans in Brooklyn, does smoke.
But it's free choice, you know what I mean? I choose to smoke. You choose not to smoke, you know what I mean? If I had a half a grain, I never would have started smoking, you know what I mean? Come on.
Keep it on there like that.
The pipes are calling.
You are watching a public service announcement that warns parents about a new health risk to children. It was just a year ago that the EPA released a landmark study that proved cigarette smoking harmed non-smokers too.
Smoke from the burning end of the cigarette contains over 4,000 chemicals and 40 carcinogens, including formaldehyde.
Here in San Jose, California, one of hundreds of cities trying to ban indoor smoking, the EPA study has given tobacco's opponents the ammunition they have been waiting for.
The EPA has said secondhand tobacco smoke is a Class A carcinogen.
Surprisingly, no one from the tobacco companies came to defend their products. But there was opposition to the proposal.
I represent an organization called Californians for Smokers' Rights.
Opposition both well-funded and well-organized. And Councilman Jim Bell believes the tobacco industry's involvement is undeniable.
These groups are funded by the tobacco lobby, definitely.
The EPA just came out with a recommendation that you shouldn't smoke in your house. I mean, what's left? They're now telling you can't smoke in your house.
Elizabeth Gallagher is a lobbyist for RJR Tobacco. Across the country, smokers' rights organizing sessions like this one are being paid for by tobacco companies. Turning Point had to use a hidden camera because the media is not invited.
Believe me, there's been extensive research on how to get to you guys,
These meetings are designed to encourage individual smokers to speak out for tobacco interests. They preach about the civil rights of smokers. But the sign outside the room confirms whose interests are really at stake.
Politicians will not listen to you if they think all you are is a mouthpiece for the tobacco companies. Your only prayer is being independent, appearing independent, and for that reason, we don't get directly involved with organizing you guys.
You non-smokers should be thanking us for smoking. After all, the excessive taxes we pay on tobacco products are paying your way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jack Anderson supports the ban on indoor smoking. He smoked for 30 years.
I have asthma, bronchitis, and emphysema. I think back now, I can still taste that lousy cigarette.
Jack started smoking in the Navy with the help of the U.S. government.
They were made available to us at 6 cents a package. How could you miss? For cheap entertainment for them. Under the guise of providing something for the lonely GI, and it was kind of a nice gesture for them, right? But you know, it's ironic that they were selling death so cheap, weren't they?
Back in World War I, before anyone knew about the dangers of smoking, cigarettes were distributed to every doughboy. To reduce the stress on the boys in the trenches, General Pershing demanded priority shipment of cartons to the front. They got them there any way they could. When the war ended, there was an epidemic in the making. Cigarette consumption among men rose over 600%. By World War II, cigarettes were accepted as a critical part of G.I. Joe's gear.
But civilians face smokeless days. No cigarettes at the corner store. The big question is, do our soldiers have smokes?
Everyone knew the answer. Plenty of smokes, as much as they wanted.
Cigarettes and cigars and pipe tobacco galore. There is no shortage.
And lung cancer rates among men began to soar.
Yes, the boys are getting cigarettes, the world's best morale builders. Cigars.
After the war, cigarette smoking steadily increased until 1964. That's when Surgeon General Dr. Luther Terry announced the results of his exhaustive study of the health effects of smoking.
The principal factor of lung cancer in this country was cigarette smoking. If we are to be successful in this country in our program against the smoking of cigarettes, it is going to depend upon our success in appealing to the youth of this country.
It's been 30 years since Surgeon General Terry began his campaign to warn children about the dangers of smoking. How ambitious an effort has it been? Well, last year, Congress spent $1 million on an anti-smoking media campaign. Tobacco companies spent $4 billion on promotion. Why didn't the Surgeon General just crack down on cigarettes in 1964? The reason is simple. The Surgeon General doesn't control national health policy. Congress does. Astonishingly, to this very day, Congress has never given authority to any federal health agency to regulate the sale or use of the nation's #1 health hazard.
Every major piece of federal legislation passed since the first Surgeon General's report that protects health and safety has specifically excluded the cigarette. Consumer Product Safety Act, Controlled Substances Act, Federal Hazardous Substances Act. Why? Because the tobacco industry has bought off Congress. Rather than doing something about the problem since 1964, Congress has turned their back on the problem. And the reason is the tobacco industry has money. It's got a lot of money.
Today, the tobacco industry is spending its money to fight their biggest challenge ever. President Clinton's commitment to pay for his health plan with a huge tax on tobacco. And the industry is using its best weapons to lobby Capitol Hill.
Hello, Jerry. Good morning. Good morning. How you doing?
Jerry Jenkins and Don Anderson are the shock troops of the tobacco industry's counterattack. But they don't work for a big cigarette company. both are third-generation tobacco farmers.
Got some friends here.
Just like smokers' rights groups, the industry has always relied heavily on farmers to put a human face on tobacco issues.
See you this morning.
The opposition is also working the halls of Congress. Only this lobbyist comes from a tobacco state, too. Ann Northup is a legislator from Kentucky.
Tobacco companies get something they really need from Kentucky besides Kentucky Burley. They get 60,000 family farmers to influence Congress not to pass excise taxes or any health provisions that would discourage smoking. That's what Philip Morris and the other tobacco companies really get from Kentucky.
I've been involved in tobacco production almost
Back home, where tobacco is a billion-dollar crop, Ann Northup is considered a heretic. She believes that the only way Kentucky farmers can survive is if they stop growing tobacco.
I am proud to be a tobacco farmer, a part of the 2% of our nation's population that provide food and fiber for the other 98%.
Ann Northup wants to use part of the proposed tax to help tobacco farmers convert to other crops. She is convinced the market for American-grown tobacco is drying up.
Has to, and I believe that we need to do something so that there will be a life after tobacco for these farmers. They are worth saving, Mr. Chairman.
Tobacco is a way of life in Kentucky. Tobacco pays the bills for the schools, for the church dues, for the taxes. It's a tradition, a 200-year tradition. God made Kentucky for burley tobacco, and that's what we do best.
Donnie Gedling grows what he calls the best burley tobacco in the world. Gedling and most Kentucky farmers are dead set against the cigarette tax.
If you talk in terms of 50 cents a pack, we're not going to last as long as a June frost. So, tobacco farmer in the Carolinas and Kentucky, Virginia, would be finished.
Donnie Gedling is not just any country farmer. He is also a state legislator and chairman of Kentucky's Tobacco Task Force, whose job it is to protect tobacco growers.
All in favor say aye. Opposed?
These lawmakers have been convinced that Clinton's proposed health tax will ruin them.
For you to tax something so heavily that a person will not buy it because you don't like that product is an absolute misuse of congressional power.
The Tobacco Task Force sort of epitomizes the old school of thought on tobacco. You know, it's people who have been in office, they've been friends of the people that represent the tobacco companies. That becomes the only source of reality to them.
What it means to our economy.
But the reality is the amount of Kentucky burley sold over the past few years has been steadily dropping. And Northup, an economist by training, says the anti-smoking movement is not the reason.
What I found is that the tobacco farmers market wasn't related at all to what the health community was doing. It's totally related to what the tobacco companies are doing. And the tobacco companies are going overseas.
This may look like the rolling hills of Kentucky, but it's not. This is Rio Grande do Sul in southern Brazil. The climate here is almost identical to Kentucky. Its major crop? Burley tobacco. In Kentucky, farmers are held to strict quotas on how much burley they can grow and what price they can sell it for. But that's not true overseas. In Brazil, farmers can sell as much tobacco as they can grow, as fast as they can grow it. And their crop sells for half the price of the same burley from Kentucky.
What we know is that the tobacco companies are directly and or indirectly subsidizing foreign farmers. They are helping them clear thousands of acres of jungles, build very inexpensive barns, promising them a market, and helping these farmers grow high-quality tobacco overseas, and that's what's replacing the Kentucky burley crop.
In fact, it is the same burley. These seeds were developed using taxpayer money at the University of Kentucky. We took these seeds and showed them to Donnie Gedling.
What are those?
Tobacco seed.
From where?
Brazil.
But what does KY14 mean?
So that's Kentucky barley. That's interesting.
What does that say to you?
That says to me that they're growing Kentucky burley in Brazil. These are the same seed that grew this burley. Kentucky 14 grows the best tobacco in Kentucky, not in Brazil.
The tobacco interests have so indoctrinated the tobacco legislators and the tobacco farmers that they refuse to believe. You can lay out all the evidence in front of them, and they refuse to believe what it all points to is really going to happen.
In Rio Grande do Sul, the air is filled with the smoke of burley farmers clearing land. And they are not alone. The same is happening in Malawi, Guatemala, Argentina, and other countries. In just 3 years, American tobacco companies have imported 225,000 tons of foreign burley.
We're at the mercy of those folks. But maybe, just maybe, they're at our mercy too for the quality that we have. They say they are. I don't know that, but they say they are. I hope they are.
Since 1990, the major tobacco companies have been slowly cutting back on buying American.
Y'all gonna make it up there?
While in Kentucky, some of the state's highest quality burley is piling up in warehouses.
Looks like you're gonna have enough room in there to hold it all. Yeah, it's close, isn't it? Yeah, it'll come out close. You want to get through, so
For the American tobacco industry, this may be the worst year in the past 2 centuries. Hundreds of cities and towns have passed laws limiting cigarette smoking. In more and more places, smokers have become outcasts, banished outdoors to indulge in what many now consider a dirty and dangerous habit. And a massive cigarette tax to fund the health care program inevitably means fewer smokers and fewer profits.
There's a lot of money involved here. And you have to remember that the domestic future of the United States cigarette manufacturers is dismal.
Dr. C. Everett Koop was Ronald Reagan's Surgeon General and the most committed anti-smoking activist to ever hold the job.
This is a losing industry in this country. Eventually, we will have a smoke-free society here. And if that's the case, you've got to find some place to get rid of this tobacco. And so, why not pick people that can't fight back?
Asia, home to nearly half the world's inhabitants. Its culture and traditions have survived unchanged for centuries. But beginning in 1986, a new wave of American culture washed over Asia. American cigarettes have come to Asia in a big way.
Come to where the flavor is. Marlboro.
And the tobacco companies could not have done it without the direct help of President Ronald Reagan.
Before he was inaugurated, there was correspondence between the Chief Executive Officer of R.J. Reynolds and the President, calling attention to the fact that the tobacco company would hope that this president would not be too tough on the tobacco industry. And the president wrote back, I don't know who wrote the letter for him, but I could hardly believe it when I eventually read it. My administration will be too busy with more important things.
Not only did the president do nothing to hurt the major tobacco companies, Ronald Reagan, a former pitchman for Chesterfield Cigarettes, actively helped them realize their long-range plans. 8 years ago, Reagan ordered the United States Trade Representative to, in effect, declare economic war on government-run tobacco monopolies in Asia. His main weapon, a presidential order threatening huge tariffs on the exports of any nations the president believed discriminated against American tobacco. Beginning with Japan, our government fought for the tobacco industry's right not only to sell cigarettes, but to advertise them. Japan caved in after a year of pressure. Television commercials for cigarettes that have been illegal in the United States for more than 20 years now play on Japanese TV and radio.
Lucky Light. Made in USA. Lucky Strike Light.
The reality is that within your country, you are reducing your tobacco epidemic with a tremendous measure of success. You've developed experience and expertise in doing so. And is that being given to us? The truth is it's not. Instead, we're getting completely the opposite side of the argument. We're getting your tobacco companies pushing into our countries with the products, advertising, promoting them, and part of your government solidly supporting that penetration.
Dr. Judith Mackay lives in Hong Kong, but she has spent much of her time traveling around Asia, helping local authorities resist U.S. government demands to allow the advertising and promotion of American cigarettes.
What it simply says is that if you do not allow in our tobacco products, if you do not allow them to us to advertise them, then your products in turn will not be allowed into the USA, and that is an extremely powerful threat.
And it was always the double-edged sword. Not only can we bring the stuff in, but we demand that we can advertise.
The two came together.
On Japanese television alone, cigarettes rose from 40th to 2nd among top advertisers once the American companies arrived. Today, Japanese girls are 4 times as likely to smoke as their mothers.
They're actually using an idealized Western culture and Western cultural images to try and persuade Asian youth to start smoking. But they've certainly done their market research on it, and they know what they're doing.
But beyond the billboards or whatever, what else do they do to convince these young people to start smoking?
Well, of course, there's an immense amount of sponsorship now throughout Asia, of sports, of arts, of pop stars. We have seen people like Madonna, Paula Abdul, Bon Jovi, going round Asian countries under the banners of tobacco companies.
And in countries with strict advertising bans, the U.S. tobacco companies attach their logos to clothing lines or travel services. But it all means the same thing to the Asian consumer.
If you ask a 3-year-old in Shanghai, what do you think Marlboro is? They can tell you that Marlboro for cigarettes. The young people are very aware what these advertisements actually stand for. And I think our real worry is that the major impact of the tobacco epidemic is still yet to be felt in Asia.
It took Taiwan only 6 weeks to give in to U.S. pressure to open its cigarette market.
Taiwan that's so much depending on the trade to survive. So this trade sanction is like a nuclear bomb to them.
Dr. Ted Chen, an advisor to Taiwan, did help the government to impose some limits on U.S. advertising. Ads were to be restricted to small signs at stores where cigarettes are sold. But this is Philip Morris's idea of a small sign. Illegal billboards like this one, with no health warnings, began to appear all over Taipei, even next to elementary schools. When we visited Changshan Elementary School, smoking was an after-school activity. The heavily advertised foreign brands are preferred by 85% of Taiwan's teenage smokers.
After the market was open, there was very aggressive cigarette advertising, and which also targeted at women and children, especially at women, and that created a great deal of concern among the people in Taiwan. Because women normally in Chinese society are not smoking, and by targeting at them, then that raised the smoking population of the women.
What is it about American cigarettes that makes people want to smoke them?
Well, America's glamorous to them, and therefore American products, whether they're Levi's or Marlboros.
It's trying to hook them on Western glamour, whatever that might be.
If you can hook them on glamour, nicotine will take over pretty soon, and then you've got them hooked forever.
If you go to a Taipei smoke shop, you'll see ads for American cigarettes, but not for the local brands. The state tobacco monopoly admits smoking is dangerous. Taiwan does not advertise its own cigarettes.
They did not advertise. That's their policy, the government policy.
Given your position as one of the lead players in the world, I think not only do you need to be mindful, but you also, I think, need to be aware of the kind of image that you are exporting.
And what is that image?
I think at the moment it is basically of a drug pusher.
They are pushing this tobacco product. They are pushing. They are not just selling. Pushing hard.
By the time the cigarette invasion reached Thailand, that country was ready. Dr. Hatai Chittanon was involved in Thailand's efforts to prohibit American tobacco imports. At the same time, Dr. Prakit Vatisadikit was appointed to the team of negotiators to deal with the American trade threats. The U.S. negotiators objected to the presence of a health official.
They even object verbally, at least object to the Thai side, bringing the health people like myself.
Why did they object?
They say this is a trade issue. It's not a health issue.
Thailand fought the American tobacco invasion for 18 months, but it was a lost cause. In November of 1990, the threat of trade sanctions won American cigarettes access to Thailand's market. But Thailand won too. It was decided that Thailand could keep its ban on advertising. Even so, that hasn't prevented the American companies from finding other ways to keep their names in the public eye.
These cigarette companies, they are ruining the American reputation around the world. I repeat, around the world. They were condemned everywhere. The way they behave, the way they market, the way they sabotage or undermine other countries' effort to control smoking. And the one who finally will be blamed is American, because this company, the headquarters is in America.
American tobacco's assault on Asia has only just begun. The biggest prize of all is China, home to 1 out of every 5 people on the planet.
The regional chairperson of Philip Morris said a few years ago, no discussion of the year 2000 would be complete without considering the most important feature on the landscape, the China market. So, I mean, they are eulogizing about their future profits. And the truth is that if every single smoker in America stopped smoking tomorrow, it really wouldn't matter one single bit if they could capture Asia.
There are 300 million smokers in China, almost all of them men. American tobacco companies are working to expand that market. The advertising onslaught is already underway.
Marlboro American Music Hour.
万宝路美国音乐1小时，现在开始。
It is illegal to advertise cigarettes on TV or radio in China.
All across China, from Beijing to Tianjin and Hangzhou, Guangzhou, everywhere in between.
This daily program, broadcast in English and Chinese, is legal, only because the word cigarette is never mentioned.
Welcome to Marlboro Country.
The program is filled with American pop tunes, the kind that appeal to young people.
So many friends, so many listeners.
The broadcast has a daily audience of 100 million.
Marlboro.
I think history will look back and see the pushing of American and British tobacco products onto Asian people as being something that is innately evil and unacceptable. I don't think history will judge America kindly in this particular aspect.
I think if these trade policies were known right now, they would be condemned by the great majority of the American people. I don't think you have to wait for history.
History will have the final word, but this much we know. The World Health Organization estimates that of all people alive today, 500 million will die from smoking-related disease. 70% of them will be from the third world.